Aloha and welcome to E Hana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of Grassroot Institute. My guest today is Takai, who's been in our state legislature for 2 decades. But I've had the privilege of knowing him since his days in college, and I have to tell you this, when somebody stands up here in our state of Hawaii and says, I'm going to be a leader, I'm going to devote myself to building a better society, economy, and government, we need to take note. And so it's with some fondness, I'll have to say, through years of friendship that I think about Takai. But also, he's someone to watch on the political scene, and we're going to be talking about leadership, about Hawaii, about some of those issues that public leaders face. And first, let me welcome to our program today, Mark Takai. Mark.
Thank you. Thank you.
Delighted to have you on the program today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, first, let me say this. Thanks for serving in public office. That's an important thing.
Oh, you're welcome.
I know
it's been a pleasure.
Back in college, there were some guys who are now today in business and in other endeavors, and you've not pursued a path to make yourself wealthy. You've pursued a path to serve the people. How does your family feel about that?
Well, you know, when I started in college, you know, my wife and I knew each other through ASUH, the student government at the university, but we didn't have kids. We got married 3 years after I got elected in '97. But I am very wealthy. I have a beautiful wife, Sammy, and 2 great kids. Matthew's 12 and Kyla's 10. I think, you know, from that perspective, very well off.
Well, wealth and all the things that really matter. And it was back in college that you were involved in the Associated Students of the University of Hawaii. In fact, you were the student body president. What year was that?
I believe it was 88, 89, or 89, 90. It was a while ago.
Now, I know you cut your teeth on politics in elementary school. Was there anything, because sometimes people don't understand the mind of the politician, was there anything about you in elementary school that would have predicted that you'd end up in a lifetime of public service?
You know, I don't think so. I think in elementary school I was a very quiet kid. I knew why I was in school, you know, worked hard, but you know, wasn't really one of those leaders. I used to look at some of the kids and, you know, really recognize them as the leaders. I got involved in 4th grade at Waimalu Elementary School as a homeroom representative.
There you go.
And that's basically where I got my start. But even through intermediate school and even to some extent in high school, Pro City High School, you know, I looked up to many other students as leaders, and basically kind of fell into student government and became a student body president at Pro City High School. You know, I wouldn't say by luck. I think, you know, there was some planning there, but you know, things just came together.
Sure. What do you think you have in your set of skills, in your abilities, that has given you relative success in getting into office year after year after year since elementary school?
Well, my parents and my grandparents always just tell us that hard work is very important. You know, we came from a family that, you know, my parents are very hard workers. My grandfather started an electrician business, and he worked extremely hard. You know, we tell our kids hard work pays off. And I think part of it is just working hard. But I think just being able to surround myself over the course of my life with wonderful people. You know, I mentioned my parents already. They're great people. You know, we have 4 kids in the family. I'm the oldest, 2 boys and 2 girls, and I think we've done pretty well. And I think a lot of it can be attributed to my parents.
Sure.
They raised us well.
Well, your parents certainly need to be congratulated on the outcome. I remember when I first met you and you were a university student, I could tell right away that you were a leader, that you weren't loud, you weren't flashy, you weren't a salesman kind of person. but you had a certain focus. you had a capacity to look beyond the social life and relationships with people and look into the future and see how there could be a different outcome. You were involved in student government right there at the university campus in all kinds of issues. And so I think that there were some marks of leadership. And although you and I may not necessarily line up on all the same political issues, we both have had a common commitment to faith and to the building of leadership.
Right. I owe a lot to you, Kaylee. I mean, you know, in college, there's a lot of things that kids, young adults can do. And I used to attend Hawaii Youth for Christ every week. And I think one of the best things that I take away from that experience was you and Max and Danny and all those guys that helped us young kids really taught us that you can do a lot with where you're going. So I think, you know, for the most part, you were one of those that continued to encourage me to stay in leadership positions in ASUH, to get a job, and you know, be an example to the world of what right is. And I think that's been encouraging for my entire career.
Well, thanks for saying that. I remember at one point you were struggling because you could choose a pathway that would be a more spiritual life, so to speak, or you could choose to go into a life that would be more in the business government world of today, a worldly life, and that was a very meaningful struggle for you in college.
Well, there's a whole bunch of things that, you know, when you're a college kid you want to do, and you know, you were one of those that said, you're good at this. You should continue to do whatever it is in terms of student government. Or I moved to the newspaper afterwards and was the editor of Kaleo. You should do these types of things because we need people in those positions who see things. You know, and you know, that was very encouraging. Appreciate that.
Well, I have to thank you that you've always opened your door for future classes, so to speak, of young men and women we were working with. And you know that Patty and I founded the Center for Tomorrow's Leaders, and we were always warmly received at the Capitol. You mentored these young men and women, shared with them, and you also arranged opportunities to be presented on the floor and so forth. And so I'm grateful for your commitment to leadership and education.
Well, I think that's very important. You're talking about high school students. Many of them are probably thinking about what's next. You know, they all aspire to be going to college, that's for sure. But what about life? And I think, you know, being able to spend some time with they were great. I mean, every single one of them probably looked better than us in their coat and ties and in their business attire. I remember go in and talk to them in my Aloha shirt and feel kind of inadequate, you know, around those students. But you know, that's part of what I enjoyed the most being in the legislature. You know, the ability to talk to young people, whether it's in our area schools or for those that come to the Capitol. You know, we've fortunately been able to preserve the 5th grade experience for many kids. They come to the Capitol, and those are the greatest.
That is something.
Yeah, we have a nice little discussion about what government does and what we do and how it's important for them to play a role. And it's a very important time for them, so I enjoy that stuff.
Well, you opened up the realities of politics too. I remember one year you took a very brave and courageous stand. We don't need to go into that, but you weren't in favor with some of the powers that be, and we still wanted to meet with you, so they said that we could stop by in the hallway and have 5 minutes with you.
Is that what happened?
Yes.
You know, I can't remember that situation, but what I do remember is you know, there's always time for you and Patty and what you were doing.
Well, thank you.
Like I said, I enjoy meeting with young people. I mean, that's one of the things that we need to do more of.
Well, you obviously encouraged and inspired some of the high school students we brought to you because, here's some good news, some of them are actually running for political office this year in 2014. And I'm sure that you were part of their inspiration. Here's maybe not so good news. They're not necessarily all in your party.
Well, that's okay. You know, I think a diversity of views in the legislative process is good.
When we look at Hawaii, and education has been one of your most significant issues, we really have a future that in many ways faces challenges. And the most important asset, if you will, that we have to face those challenges is the young people. That's right, and their education. You know, what are some of the major issues with regard to education that have been on your heart and in your career in the House you've tried to push forward?
Right. Well, I can talk about specific things in relation to education, but here's a macro level. You know, I mentioned our two kids, Matthew's 12 and Kyla's 10. They both go to public schools in IAEA. IAEA Intermediate and Waimalu for our daughter. My wife and I are both public school educated, so we care deeply about our public school system, and it's very important. But here's what I see, and this is the reason why I care so deeply about what we do and what we will do in the future. I love the University of Hawaii.
Yes,
I encourage anybody to go to UH. I think it's a great school in Manoa and all the other campuses, the 9 other campuses. But should my children decide to go to a mainland college, a mainland university, I want to give them that option. But I want to make sure that we have the opportunities here in Hawaii so they can come home. There's many young people leaving the state and choosing not to come back. That is something that we all have to work together on, regardless of you know, Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative. We need to create a state of Hawaii, our home, and work hard to preserve what we have and improve it so that people in the future, our kids, will choose to stay home or come home. And you know, that's why I work so hard every day.
Well, you know, one of the difficulties is when you're in the political arena, a lot of good ideas get a political label attached to them, or a bad idea does as well. And we end up not being able to do what's really good for the young people. I know that as you've raised your children, you've wanted to make sure that they have had the most tailored, the best education they can. What are some of the good things, if you will, for a moment, that are happening in our Department of Education, our statewide education system, that actually can be built even better and help us to equip our young people for the future that we need in this state?
Well, I think the focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math is critical. You know, when you talk about jobs, the future jobs in Hawaii, and being able to provide for young people so that they can come back home and have a decent living, it's those types of jobs that utilize innovation and research. Those are critical.
Sure.
I think that the refocusing and targeting on those types of subject matter is important, because that's where we have to move. I mean, you know, not to say anything about agriculture or tourism or all the other, you know, other industries that are critical to our state, but if we're going to take a look at expanding the economy and expanding the base and creating jobs that truly will bring home some of our people that have done quite well.
Sure.
We're going to have to, you know, create those opportunities.
Absolutely. We not only need to solve the brain drain,
Right.
we need to solve it by creating those economic conditions and that academic capacity that can really make a difference. We'll keep talking about this in a moment, but I'm with Akina Takai, representative in the state legislature in the House of Representatives here in Hawaii, somebody who has devoted his life to pursuing better education for Hawaii's young people, better conditions for those in the military, especially veterans, as we honor them. And we'll resume our conversation in just a moment. This is Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute on E Hana Kako, which means let's work together on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We'll be right back after this message.
I'm Jay Fidel. That's Sharon Moriwaki of the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. And every Wednesday we have Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy. We've been doing it for some time now, and we have some fantastic guests on there, unbelievable guests who give us insight into what is going on in a very complex, sometimes very confusing, sometimes very disappointing area of progress in the state. So we love doing this. We love meeting them. We love talking to them. We love having their ideas out on the table. So maybe, just maybe, we can all make some sense of what's going on. Sharon, what do you think?
I think that's absolutely correct. We enjoy ourselves meeting with all these people and hearing about the energy and the state of clean energy, and hopefully we advance clean energy for the state. So it's terrific. Join us.
Okay, it's every Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday is Energy Day. Every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. Hawaii, the state of clean energy, here on ThinkTech Hawaii. We'll see you there.
Welcome back to today's segment of E Hana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We're talking about Hawaii, leadership, political leadership, and having the vision to move us forward into a better future. My guest today is Takai, a representative in the House of Representatives of the State Legislature of Hawaii. I'm Keli'i Akina, and before we go on, I wanted to say thanks to our producer, Jay Fidel. What a great job you and all the crew at ThinkTech Hawaii are doing, and we're glad for the service that you provide. Now back to our conversation. Mark, well, we were talking a little bit earlier, we came to the subject of education.
Right.
And you brought up STEM, and,
Right.
and there are a couple of reasons I like the discussion as it's gone forward on STEM. One is, it's truly a bipartisan effort because
Right.
the Lingle administration brought this to the fore, and Democrats have picked up on it as well. And so this is where Republicans and Democrats can agree we need science, technology, engineering, and math.
Right.
But interestingly, in highlighting the real need of this, there have been some sectors have said, we're leaving out the arts.
Right.
We're leaving out the humanities. You know, I'm a philosopher and see the value of that for every endeavor whatsoever. Yet, you've introduced an approach that helps bring them all together. Instead of just STEM, we now have STEAM.
Right, they call it STEAM.
STEAM, tell us
So
about
we
that.
infuse arts in education. And, you know, this was about 2002 when we passed a measure. I worked with a bunch of people in the state. We created what we call the Hawaii Arts Partners, bringing together a number of important art organizations focusing on art education. And we were the very first state in the nation to create a requirement in state law that says that our Department of Education must have art standards. And it was at that time when they were just focusing on the 4 core, and we forced the department to expand it to include arts. You know, when I was growing up, I didn't have too much arts. You know, I mean, I went to I had band one year. You know, I did some painting and other things, but you know, that was missing. And one of the things that I learned through being in the legislature is how important arts is. I served for 4 years on the Honolulu Symphony Board of Directors. And the great thing about this, and this is kind of, you know, coming around, is my son. Our son is now in band. He plays the French horn and he loves it. He's doing very well. And our daughter as well, she loves art. I think that's really important because it balances the psyche, it balances the person. And you know, in Hawaii, there's so much around Hawaii that's based on arts. You know, some people call it culture, but truly, you know, our native people feel very strongly about certain things, and to me, you know, that's art.
Sure. And you know what I appreciate about this, it isn't an either or. You have science and tech on one hand, or you have an education and arts.
That's why I said arts infused.
Absolutely. So it's both and. And being able to think with the right brain and the left brain, being able to calculate and create are such important things for the individual. But aren't they important for the economy as well? Do you remember when our symphony had some struggles and we were without a symphony? We were a major city and we had no symphony. It just felt naked, so to speak, and it affected us in terms of visitors and just the stature of our city.
Right. Every significant city in our nation and probably this world has a symphony.
That's right.
You know, now we have the symphony, we have the pop symphony, and we continue to have the opera theater. Those are 3 organizations that I continue to support. They're very important. In fact, a few weeks ago, I brought my son to the symphony. They were doing a pops program with Stewie. Stewie used to be the timpani player, and now he's doing very well as a conductor. It was great to see a lot of those musicians, and you know, for my son, just to see the horn section and being able to talk to the musicians what was, to me, I think, the most rewarding over the past 20 years. I mean, you know, you finally see the fruits of your labor working closely with these musicians as a lawmaker, but to see your child experience it from that perspective. I remember watching, because we were sitting on the back the first half and then we moved to the side, just how focused he was on the music and
Sure.
just watching, you know, the conductor and just the musicians. It was just fascinating.
That's great. You know, I can tell that you appreciate the role music and the arts can play in your children. You know that one of the things that's been on my heart has been to expand the opportunity for parents to play a hand in their children's education, to have more choices out there. And certainly those who can afford the private schools have multiple choices. But for those in the public school, and it's really the province of the legislature and government to help take care of that, one of the things that sometimes we're concerned about are few choices, but with the expansion of the arts as well as technology and so forth, do you envision that there'll be centers of excellence where some schools will actually be able to focus, like the magnet schools in New York, on science and technology, others on performing arts and so forth? In some ways like the Hawaiian cultural immersion schools.
Right. I think we have a little bit of all of that. You know, we do have the immersion schools. We've done it for almost 2 decades, and they're doing very well. You know, what I like about schools like the immersion schools or charter schools and some of our, not necessarily magnet schools, but schools within schools and what do they call it? Academies, I guess.
Yes, the academies.
Right. Is the involvement of the parent. If you take a look at education, we can no longer just let kids go and assume that they're going to grow up to be great, you know, adults. We got to go back. You know, when you go back years ago, the parents were very much involved. And one of the things that I thought, one of the things that I admired when watching the immersion program is how immersed the parents were in the child's education.
That's right.
And to me, that's probably the most important thing.
Well, you know, it's good to hear that this is an option growing within our public schools, because anything we can do to move away from a one-size-fits-all actually serves the parents. What I like especially is this, and I think sometimes it's not said loudly enough. There's an important role for parents even in the public schools, especially in the public schools, because that role is one in which parents guide their students and their children, and they know more than anyone else what the needs of their children are.
Years ago, I created this program called HEPS, Hawaii Education Performance System, and it was a two-part program. The first part was measuring student success. The second part was how do we move the dial regardless of where the school is. But the first part was really eye-opening. I put together an econometrics model based on uncontrollables, things that educators say that matter, that are sometimes out of their control. Things like socioeconomic status, which everyone understands. But the strongest indicator of student success involves the parent. Because if a child is not in school, he or she will not learn. And we measured things. We put it in this model, this econometrics model. And according to a friend of mine who does these for a living on the banking side and the business side, he said it was the strongest predictability model out of everything.
Absolutely.
There are key things, and there's 4 of them, that drive student success. So what that tells me is that, you know, regardless of how great our teachers are, we will not succeed unless some of these things, parents and community, come together. And that was probably, you know, early 2000s that I learned that, and that kind of guided me through the rest of my career as I focused on education. The other part of HEPS was flipping it into a business type of model, and people are concerned, worried, afraid, but here's what I see. Measuring student success or measuring a school success on a test taken once a year is, from my perspective, questionable at best. No other industry or business does that. You go down to the nearest gas station or store, everybody's measuring success on a weekly, daily, or hourly basis. So there are things that we can do in our schools that measure success that cost very little money and take very little time. For example, how many schools measure parent participation? Or how many schools measure volunteer hours? Or how many schools measure books borrowed from the library? We measure all of that because it's required by law and required by departmental directive. but we don't bring it all together. So
Sure.
what we did was created a weekly service review where we could show performance and productivity from each school on a weekly basis.
So that's wonderful.
So those are some of the things that, you know, I started more than 10 years ago that kind of guided me my last half of my career in my you know, focus on education.
Mark, I know you're being very authentic when you talk about the role of a parent, because you are a parent yourself, and you have benefited from parents who took a major hand in determining how your education would unfold. And yet sometimes politically, and this is what I like talking with you, we avoid this. Politically, people adopt certain structures that they advocate for or against, certain overall processes, without really honing in like you have and said, it's about parents. It's about parent engagement, the number one variable, harnessing it, empowering it, enabling it, and parents guiding their children in terms of being able to have the kinds of choices and the kinds of role they need as their guides. And so if we can somehow work around that, as you're trying to do, I think we'll come up with better solutions and keeping that in the forefront. Sometimes it's not easy, but I like the fact that you've been able to identify that value.
Well, it's also my wife. I mean, she's the one that spends a lot of time in our schools. She's been, I think, the parent-teacher organization president for the last 3 years. You know, so we are invested in our schools as a family. But there are many other families like that. And you know, the biggest challenge that I see is not so much the elementary school ages. You see a lot of parents supporting their kids, going to all of the, you know, the meetings and the recognition ceremonies and stuff. I think the challenge is in middle school, where you see only 2, maybe 3 years, and you see a huge fall off in parent participation and involvement. And definitely in high school, you know, the kids don't even want us around, right? So those are the most critical times, I think, you know, in adolescent and pre-adult. And you know, we've got to just find a way to keep our parents engaged.
Very good.
You know, and that's very important for me, and we're going to keep focused on that as a family.
There's another issue that I know is dear to your heart, and that is the military itself. You serve in the National Guard. You continue to. In fact, what is your rank right now?
Lieutenant Colonel.
And so you play a very important role in our defense. In addition to that, you also have played an important role in honoring our veterans. And I wonder if you might just share a little bit about what's on your heart in that area.
Well, there's so much to the military and to what Hawaii needs in the future surrounding the military. And I think we appreciate that. In fact, the latest survey shows that the support for the military is pretty high, over 80%. So I think we as local people understand the benefits to a strong military. And as a result of the wars, the recent wars, we've paid dearly, you know, as a state and as a country. For the state of Hawaii, we created in 2005 the Hawaii Medal of Honor. And just recently we recognized 4 families with the medal. But over the course of the last 10 years, we've lost as a state 331 service members. And you know, that's a really tough situation for the families. And you know, what we want to do and what we wanted to do back then was to just show our families that we as a state and we as people care deeply about them. The people from Hawaii appreciate it. You know, there are Gold Star families living here that continue to live here and call Hawaii home. But what's fascinating about this program are the families that aren't from here, are the families that didn't even visit Hawaii until we had that program. And to this day, we have many of them calling our office and contacting us because we're the only contact with Hawaii with these families.
Certainly.
You know, and that's the least we can do. I mean, we've done so many other things, but as a state, as a legislature, we come together in joint session. The governor comes, the adjutant general comes. This year, the Chief Justice came, and you know, we honor and recognize the sacrifices of people that have gave of themselves.
Very good.
More than anything.
When we come back from a quick break, I want to ask you a bit about your efforts toward the education of the children of our military families, a very important population here. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute. My guest today is Legislator Takai. We'll be back on E Hana Kako on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network in just a moment.
Hi, my name is Dr. Rafi. Every week, I'm right here at ThinkTech Hawaii, 3 p.m. on Mondays. My show is Boards' Bio-briefings. What do we do here? Well, we watch sperm swim, we see if they catch anybody, we check out the latest biosimilars, you know, the kind that, what was his name, the guy with the bicycle? I guess we forgot his name, but he was taking EPO and other human growth factors. We'll be talking about human growth factors. You want to know where to get some? Maybe I'll tell. Anyway, you can catch me, as I said, every week right here, Monday, 3 p.m., ThinkTech Hawaii, Dr. Rafi. You can also find me on Twitter, BioInfo Medical. Or you can catch me on Facebook, Dr. Rafael Boritzer. I'll be happy to converse with you. Aloha.
Welcome back to E Hana Kako, which means let's work together. That's the motto at the Grassroots Institute, working together for a better economy, government, and society. And one group we're delighted to work together with is ThinkTech Hawaii. What an outstanding organization that is sponsoring not only many, many hours of original content every week, and you can see that content on www.thinktechhawaii.com, but also conferences and a new feature that we have, the Downtown Forum, which takes place monthly, bringing together thinkers and movers and shakers. There'll be a message about that coming up soon. I'm Keli'i Akina, and my guest today is Takai, who is a 20-year veteran in the State House of Representatives. We've been talking about some of the important issues that he has been championing for years, and we're going to dive right back into that. Mark, we've been talking about education and the military, and in many ways you've actually worked to meet a need of many newcomers to Hawaii, that is the education of their children, the military personnel's children, and there are some special needs there.
Yes, I mean, truly, you know, kids in the military, because of the way deployments are and because of the way military families move, many of them have seen 7, 8, 9, 10 different schools over their 13 years from kindergarten to senior year. And Hawaii is no different. I mean, you know, they come here, they want the best for their children. And one of the things that I pride myself in my career as a legislator is really bridging education with the military. I worked very closely with Senator Inouye when we created the Joint Venture Education Forum. That's still going very well. But one of the things that I worked on personally is creating better opportunities for families and better opportunities for the Department of Education. So probably about 15 years ago, we created the military liaison at the Department of Education. Today, that person is Sharice Imai. She's doing a great job. Her job is to make sure that military families have someone, an advocate in the Department of Education, addressing concerns and fulfilling needs. Now, she works closely with what we call school liaison officers. Every single branch in the military, and we have all 5 branches here in Hawaii, but every single branch has at least one of them. In the case of the Army, probably they have a half dozen of them. And they interface with Sharice and our complex area superintendents, our principals, to work together to provide our children, regardless of whether they're military or non-military, with the best education possible. A few years ago, actually it was in 2001, after working with these national organizations, I found that the state of Hawaii wasn't participating in a federal program to draw down federal monies in recognition for what we call privatized housing. I'm sorry, privatized construction of privatized housing on military bases. And we were able to, again, partner with the military, in this case the military housing officials, with the Department of Education. And it was my office that coordinated this effort for the first 6 years. Remarkably, after the first year, we claimed over $6 million that wouldn't have come had it not been for this partnership that we developed. So over 6 years, we were able to bring in 40 million. I'm really proud of that because I know for a fact that if we didn't do the work, this money would have never come to the state. And that's that's because we're able to pull together people that in the past never worked together. Also work with national organizations like the Military Impacted Schools Association and the National Association of Federally Impacted Schools. Those two national organizations helped me understand what we needed to do in the state. And today I'm very proud that we are, as the Department of Education, State of Hawaii, participants, major participants in those two organizations, and it's paid rich dividends.
Well, what you're talking about here, in a sense, goes back to your earlier comments about the importance of making sure that parents can be engaged, making sure parents, wherever they go, if they travel from one state to another or one country here to Hawaii with the military, still have some way of saying, we've got better options for our children. They're not just going to be put into a cookie cutter system. And one of the things that you and I have had discussion over is how it's important to depoliticize terms like school choice or educational choice, because they don't just mean one thing. There are many, many options I see in the picture that you've been advocating for. There is allowing for science, technology, education, math training, the arts training, STEAM training, tailored programs within the military so that, or for children of the military, as well as parents who may want to go to a charter school. We've talked about charter schools, or some who homeschool in Hawaii. So isn't this really a picture of what Hawaii is like, in a sense, the diversity and the opportunity to give parents the real empowerment to see that their kids get the education they need?
Right, absolutely. I mean, we're very fortunate to have a SEA and LEA, state education agency and a local education agency combined. We're the only state in the nation that has one system. Most of the states run their education systems at the county or the city level. You know, so you go to Los Angeles, it's not a Department of Education running all the schools in Sacramento. It's every single community running their schools. Now, some people will say that that's the way we should go. I look at it differently. I think it provides, having a one-state system provides continuity and consistency throughout the system, and I think that's important. But the other thing that it provides is the ability for the legislature in this case and the State Department of Education to really get involved and into the schools to make these opportunities available. And we have, as you mentioned, a number of different opportunities for kids, and I would argue that if a parent wants to send their kid to Pro City or to Moanalua because of a different type of program, or anywhere, the schools will allow that to happen, because we don't have clearly magnet schools, but we have academies and we have focus that allows children with their parents to choose one school over the other.
In a sense, it sounds like you're talking about something that may be called a district exemption, where a parent can actually apply to have their child attend a school that has a program that better suits the child. What do you think the future of this possibility could be here?
It's good. If it wasn't for our statewide system, you wouldn't be able to go to school in town. That would not be allowed.
What I like about this discussion is we've moved off of, should we have a centrally controlled government system, or should we have it completely up to the parent and so forth, into the realm of, well, these are the structures that do exist. What can we do to empower parental choice? What can we do to tailor education to kids? And so I think that this is the common ground I would like to see succeed. I know that not everybody comes together politically on the structural issues, and there's work to be done, but it sounds like you're a champion of making sure that parents and kids have the real needs met, and that's at the heart of education.
Right. I mean, I think it's, well, as I told you before, I mean, education is very important for my family, and because of that, I think it's probably the most important thing for everyone. But you know, you got to give kudos to the teachers and to the administrators of the school. You know, my sister, my youngest sister, is a teacher. We all graduated from Pro City High School. She chose to go into teaching, and she teaches math at Pro City. You know, she has long days. She's grading papers at night, and You know, from my perspective, we don't pay them enough. You know, we've got great people sacrificing, giving up of a lot of their personal time to educate our kids. And
important.
Yeah, and I think we need more help, and that's where you know, the parents come in.
Well, thank you very much. You've been listening to K-Mark Takai, representative in the House of Representatives in the state legislature here in Hawaii. And I'm Keli'i Akina on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We'll be right back in just a moment, but I want to tell you in our final segment, you need to come back, because we're going to be talking about the future of Hawaii. We're going to be talking about some political understanding of who we are as a people and where we may go. We'll be right back after this.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidel. This is ThinkTech Hawaii, broadcasting live from the Pioneer Plaza in downtown Honolulu. We raise public awareness about tech, energy, and globalism in Hawaii. Technology is critical to our state. A vibrant tech sector will give us new prospects in the global marketplace and will offer great careers and make our economy more resilient. Streaming live on Ustream and Spreaker, ThinkTech allows its hosts and guests invaluable opportunities to report important events and discuss important questions, and to be heard here in Hawaii and around the world. You can find links to our live streams on thinktechhawaii.com or on our mobile website, m.thinktechhawaii.com. And you can see our archive on YouTube. It's all just a click away. We want to do whatever we can to keep Hawaii relevant, connected, and thriving in the complexity of the 21st century. We hope you will help us in those efforts. Tune in today. This is ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidel. Mahalo.
Welcome back to E Hana Kako on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of Grassroots Institute. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation so far. In talking with Representative Mark Takai, we've covered a broad range of issues. But more than that, we've tried to get down to some of the values that are important. For example, in education, structure is important, and there will be many political battles over which structure is the correct structure. But bottom line, we've got to find a way to empower parents to be able to make the right choices for their children. And that's something that can happen when we're looking to fulfill that value. Today, I hope you've also gotten to learn a little bit more about the heartbeat of Representative Takai. Let me just get back with one question to him about education, and then I want to move on and talk a bit about the future of Hawaii by looking into the past a little bit. Mark, you were just talking a little bit during the break about a program that you have in education.
Well, one of the things that I enjoyed doing was spending time with Senator Inouye. And you know, when earmarks died, it was a big challenge for all of us. But we created this grant program at the Department of Defense, and he set aside about $55 million a year. Fortunately for Hawaii, and this is a national initiative, but we were able to benefit in Hawaii. This program called the National Math and Science Initiative was formed. And the focus of that particular organization was advanced placement courses. So we went into four schools the first year, and now we're in our fifth school. 4 schools being Mililani, Leilehua, Radford, and Campbell, and the 5th school is Kalaheo on the windward side. Now, why that's important? The results of that program were incredible, more than twice the results of previous years. I seem to think that a program like that needs to be spread across the entire state. There's no reason why we should just focus on those 5 schools, except for the fact that the federal funds are paying for those schools with students of military families. But I go into those schools and I ask them, you know, how many of you are military and how many of you are local, non-military? And what's surprising about that is a program that we started with the NMSI and the AP program would have never happened without the military families being there. So I tell all the students as well as the faculty that it's because of this partnership of bringing together military and non-military alike that we have programs like this in our school. And I'll end this segment on education by saying that I believe what's good for a military child is good for every kid. So when we take a look at providing services for our military families, taking care of them when they come into our state or leave our state, there's no reason why we shouldn't provide that to any other family.
Absolutely.
And that's been my guiding principle from the very beginning.
Mark, much of what we experience today is the result of a heritage we have of about 60 years of the growth of the Democratic Party here in Hawaii, back in the days of John Burns and Senator Inouye when he was starting out in our state legislature and so forth. We had a new vision as to what could take place here in these islands. And I want to ask you a question, and I'm not asking you to answer as a Democrat.
Okay.
I want you to answer simply as someone who understands this heritage. What is the distinctive of this half century of Democrat leadership in the state of Hawaii?
Well, you know, I think, and I wasn't around in '54.
That's right.
But from what I understand, I mean, there was a very different world back then, and I think it was really the plantation era and the transitioning from plantation off of the plantation into business, and you had that huge wave because I think, for the most part, back then there was really rich people and very poor people. There was almost no middle class, and I think over the course of the 60 years, the biggest benefit I think to this democratic wave in '54, and it continued, you know, to recently, is the expansion of the middle class. You know, a lot of people say, why do we have government? You know, government's causing all these problems. I say the reason why we have government is to provide opportunities to grow a middle class. If we didn't have a government with some of the laws and regulations, we, I believe, would still be in a situation where we have the have and the have-nots, the very rich and the very poor.
So some of this history you're talking about was captured in a seminal little book by Tom Kaufman, Catch a Wave, and so to speak, to use the metaphor. And it did talk about a transition for people that gave them enfranchisement and opportunities and economic capabilities that they didn't have. So I think you're right about the growth of opportunity for a middle class, and a middle class of quite a bit of diversity,
right,
which is really something distinctive of Hawaii. Now, at the same time, we've had institutions come into play, we've had power structures come into play over time, and in many ways, although you're part of the party that is dominant, you're not someone who just goes along with the wave, so to speak. You're trying to bring some kinds of transition now as we move forward. What kinds of things would be good for Hawaii? What kinds of changes do you think may be necessary?
Well, I think the world is different from the '50s. I mean, you know, we are so far away from the plantation era. You know, my great-grandparents were on the plantation, not my parents. So that type of history is almost lost on my kids, you know, and I think there's an expectation on the younger generation, our children, and maybe you know, the generation just a little bit behind me and my generation, that expects a lot more from government, regardless of where you come from, and I think that's very important. You know, I think people need to understand, or people need to believe that the system, the government, provides and rewards for hard work. You know, we started this whole conversation about hard work, and you know, one of the things that I truly believe, and we talked about it earlier, is partnerships are very critical, regardless of party. You know, I have great friends on both sides of the aisle, and I think in order for us to move forward, we need to work together. Congress is the greatest example of what happens when you don't have partnerships and when you don't bring people together. You have people on the left really dug in, you have people on the right really dug in. I say that, you know, the class of 2014, whoever that's going to be, will provide the opportunity to bridge it. We have too much at stake, both at the federal level and also at the state level, to just rely on partisan politics. I think that partnering and working together for the betterment of our state and nation is where we've got to focus in on.
Well, Mark, I want to thank you. Time has come to an end and gone by so very, very quickly. Appreciate what you've done in your life of public service and wish you the best in all of your endeavors now. Thanks for being on the program.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We've been talking to Akina Takai, representative in the Hawaii House of Representatives, someone who's been there for 20 years, and somebody who is seeking to serve the public in the future. I'm Akina with the Grassroots Institute, saying thanks to Jay Fidel and the entire ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Look us up on thinktechhawaii.com. Much aloha until next time on E Hana Kako. Let's work together.